Welcome to The Truth, conversations no one likes to have. I'm your host, Shawana Smiley, and today we're going to be speaking about the power of unforgiveness. Stay tuned. My guest today has been in ministry for over 10 years, and she's married to Dr. Lawrence Weiner, who is pastor of Empowerment Christian Center, and she is currently co-pastor with him. Evangelist Weiner has degrees in the arts, education, and technology. She is the owner of 3 companies. Let's just say she's a woman of many talents. You all help me welcome my guest, pastor, evangelist, co-pastor, woman of many talents, Shanita Winder. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you? That's okay. I get that all the time.
You are definitely a woman of many talents, but you're also a woman of faith.
Oh, yeah.
And you have been through some things.
Oh, yeah.
From childhood even up to your adult life. Today, I just want to speak about the power of forgiveness because you have an amazing testimony about some things that you went through as a child. And I wanted to bring you on because there's many women that's going to be watching today that may have similar testimonies or maybe even going through it right now and need to hear your testimony and how God brought you through and how the power of forgiveness has freed you.
Oh, yeah.
Can you share a little bit about your testimony?
Like my gifts, where do I begin? I'll begin with this. We were talking a little bit before the segment, and one of the things that God says is your gifts will make room for you.
Yes.
But what many people don't know is that many of those gifts are birthed from pain. Some of the companies that God birthed in me and gave me, as a child, I indulged in arts, writing poetry. That was my outlet. Just to give a little quick synopsis of me, I was born to a teenage mother. She was 15 when she had me in Alabama. And back then that was not popular. So of course she was put out of school at the age of 15. She moved to Pensacola following, a life what she thought would be a new life of her own. In the midst of that time, she connected with her husband, who of course was not my father, but it was my brother's father. And I guess she thought that was an opportunity for her to have a new life. Unfortunately, I experienced being molested by him. And I was 6 going on 7 before I got the nerve to tell her about it. And the reason I didn't tell her was because he always threatened that if I ever told anybody, he would kill her, us, me and my brother, and himself. And I believed him because he was very abusive. He drank a lot. And so he was very abusive. I can remember a lot of the nights, and it's amazing that since moving back to Pensacola, because fast forwarding in 1976, after I told her, she asked for a divorce. And of course, he didn't want to give it to her. He was always saying, if I can't have you, no one else could. And unfortunately, on that day, July 24th, 1976, he made good on his promise. And he murdered her while she was taking a bath. And fortunate for us, and I guess she felt it, she put me and my brother at our great aunt's house while she went back to the house to get ready for a family reunion. And I'm sharing that because for the first time, when I moved here in 2015, God had already told me, especially when I first got in ministry, he said, can I take your pain and use it for my glory? And I said, Daddy, we got to have a conversation about that. Because see, what many people don't know is I had my own little Pandora's box that I put in the molestation. I put in all these other hurts, all these other pains. and I locked it up. And I was not intending to tell anybody about it, because if I could hide it, then I could be who I wanted to be behind my mask. I could forget about what happened to me. When I moved here, I had the opportunity to go to him and tell him I forgave him.
Wow.
Now keep in mind, I had family members that was not proud about that at all, because they were still hurting from what he had done from this.
Yeah.
My brother is 4 years younger than me. And of course, he was going on 3 when it happened to him. I was going on 7. He had no memory of our mother or his father. So a lot of that was more resentment on his part towards his dad. But still, I had to learn, okay, that's his father. I can't make him choose between me and he has other siblings. So I had to even learn to forgive them because of things that they did to me, that they later, shared with him. And he was like, wow, I thought she was, reacting this way overboard. But if this is what you all did to her, no wonder. And I even had an opportunity to forgive that one of those siblings in that. So most people might say, well, forgiveness is easier said than done. And I will clarify, it truly is. Because when you've been hurt by someone you trusted, when you've gone through a lot, it doesn't make it easy to say you forgive them. But what we have to understand is that forgiveness is more for you than them. And so that's what God had to show me when he moved me back here, because he knew everything about Pensacola was a reminder of what was taken from me, of what I had gone through. And that little girl had not healed in that area. I had healed in a whole lot of other areas. And God used the many talents he gave me, the arts, my education, writing, poetry, all these different things, to help me to express myself. And so I even went into education to teach. I didn't teach the arts because I couldn't do anything else. I mean, I was gifted in math and science and English and all of those subjects. So what I did, I began to teach children that were like me, that had gone through a lot in their childhood, teach them how to express themselves through creative writing, through visual arts, through theater, through dance, to give them an outlet. And I've been blessed to see a lot of those children doing well. And even those that maybe just didn't make it, they still had a way, to get that outlet out. So all of these things gave me the ability, coupled with the first thing, my relationship with God, to be able to forgive. And the forgiveness comes from, you're not forgiven from in the midst of you. Flesh is a mess. And flesh wants what it wants. And if I yielded to my flesh, I would not forgive. But the spirit will always override that flesh if you're subjective to it. And the spirit says you love past your own understanding. You love in that agape way, which is not just yours, it's the Holy Spirit's. I remember one of the first times with my ex-husband, one of the women that was interjecting in our relationship, after she had moved on and so forth, God made her call me. And the thing is, it took 3 calls before she got to me, because each time she kept hanging up. And she said, she said, I had a relationship with God once. So I knew that was his voice. And I was asking him, why are you sending me back to her? And yet she said, God told me she has a word for you from me, but you got to get forgiveness from her. And so when she called me and she began to share, flesh wanted to hang that phone up. But the spirit said, no, listen to her as if she had never done anything to you. How would you minister to her? And in that moment, something, and I know what that something is, came upon me and allowed me to experience a forgiveness with someone that went beyond my understanding, because then it was like a wave of compassion came over me, and I began to minister to her, and not just on that occasion, but on multiple occasions, to the point I gave her a Bible that was dear to me. I met up with her and gave her some CDs that helped to push me through, and she got delivered through it.
Let me ask you this, because even, I mean, you spoke to two different situations. How were you able, if you felt like you needed to, because sometimes we blame ourselves for what happened.
Yeah.
Like going back to your childhood, you know, your stepfather threatened you and said, if you do this, then this is what's going to happen. And as a child, you know, after it took place, it's almost like, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said that, you know. And then even going back to your ex-marriage, you still sometimes go into that blame game of yourself, even though you may be the victim.
Right.
The victim of the circumstance. So how were you able to get past that? Because I know you went through that.
Yeah. For years, and the thing is that my grandmother, and a lot of these things just recently, since 2015, that I've started making rectifications with, because my grandmother, who had a close relationship with my mother, they were born in the same month and they died in the same month. Wow. But she always said, you shouldn't have said anything, that if you'd have kept your mouth closed, that your mom would still be here. So I had that going on inside of my head. And I know she did not mean it from
she was just
a place. She was hurting. And that was the only way she could grasp that particular thing. But yes, for years, I thought that it was my fault that my mom, was murdered by my stepfather because of what I told. And I always second guessed it until, again, my relationship and my walk with God, that, I mean, it caused me to step away from people. I had the privilege, and I'm going to interject this in, to meet Dr. Maya Angelou before she died. I did one of her last big events that she hosted in Atlanta. And in her telling her story, even though I had heard it before, hearing it firsthand in her own voice personally, when she said that, when she shared about what happened to her with her molestation, she stopped talking for years. Because it ended up, she knew that the man that did it to her was murdered, and she knew it was because of what she said, so she stopped talking. So for me, it was like, okay, don't say anything else, engross yourself in other things. And it was in those moments that God had to talk to me and remind me that it wasn't my fault. And as I got older and had a relationship with him, he said, I allowed these things to happen so that my glory is revealed. We don't always understand it. And it wasn't until that moment of him, cleansing that out of me to give me the confidence that when people said things, no, that wasn't my fault. No, I'm not going to take the blame for that. I was a child. I had no control over that. And even when I went to talk to him, he had another friend present there, and I took my current husband, Dr. Winder, when we were engaged, he went with me. And in him telling, I guess he thought I'd come for another reason. And I told him, I have to forgive you because I know I'm going to be living in this city. I don't want to come across you and then we have this awkward moment. So I want you to understand I'm here and I have to do what God told me to do because I'm a pastor, because I'm a woman of God, because I'm a child of his. I can't have any respect of persons. So my forgiveness is coming from a space of obedience first, even though there are other things that I still got to heal from. And when he began to share some things that he God had done for him since then and everything, resentment tried to come in, anger tried to come back in, because I'm like, wait a minute, you're bragging about all these things God have done, and here my mom is in that cold ground because of the choice you made. And then God said, but if he asks me to forgive him, I'm going to forgive him. So you can't have any respect to person. So that not blaming myself that this had to happen was one phase. The same thing with my ex-husband. A lot of times some men and some women, because domestic violence is not just, one gender or gender specific. A lot of times I was told that if I hadn't done X, Y, and Z, he wouldn't have stepped out of the home or those type of things. So it's always made to feel like things, the decisions that you make are because of what you've done or haven't done. We tend to build up walls to protect ourselves. And so when you build up that wall to protect yourself, it makes you get on defense to where people will try to blame you for their reaction rather than just receiving that this person is hurt, this person is going through something, and maybe I should look at it at a different way. And so just God reminded me, I allowed it, kept coming back in, and that everything that's happening to you happened so that you can walk in the direction that I have you going.
Wow. Can you speak a little bit about your organization?
Yes, the organization is called Hattie M. Wiggins Domestic Violence Foundation. And what that is, after over 40 years, I mean, he gave it to me at the 40th year, but I just wasn't in that space right then to birth it. But October 1st of last year, I was able to establish this foundation, and on the premises of collaborating with other domestic violence shelters for fundraising efforts to help support these shelters, to be an entity to help, I say alleviate, but as long as we have the human race, it's going to be hard to completely wipe out all of these issues that we deal with, but we can start to decrease it. And so I'm hoping that I'll be through testimonials, through celebrating other women who've gone through it. This foundation will be able to reach out to them beyond the borders of what's available. Yes. In 1976, Pensacola didn't have a domestic violence shelter. Wow. My mother went from her sister's house to him being put out rather than us, going through that cycle over and over again. I actually collaborated with Favor House here and talked with the director, Sue, and with the director of operations, Marsha, and shared with her my goal to collaborate, and we do different things for these women. While they're one of the first biggest thing is my Mary Kay unit. And of course, Mary Kay supports domestic violence and other charitable entities. But anyway, we donated some gift baskets for Christmas, because when you make a decision to leave a home because of the violence that you go through, and you come out, the first thing, especially around the holidays, is usually the hardest, because that's when you want to be around family. That's when you want to feel the love. And so with this foundation, I want us to be an entity to those women there, to let them know you don't have to go back there for that. You have people that don't know you that will love on you, that will be that support that you need. And so pretty much that's what I want this foundation to do. And I look at children that come up in those type of situations. A lot of times you'll have that generational curse and need to continue, because I stayed in it trying to give them the 2-parent home and hoping that things would change. But then, you have to just get to a point where you realize that this is in God's will. You should love yourself more than anything. And I wasn't going to die the way that my mother did. So, my children, and they look at it the same way. I mean, actually, it was my kids. My youngest son, who was not my son I birthed, but he was my son, and he said, "Mom, we're graduating. What's your excuse now?" Because he saw, when it gets to where the children are saying, "It's time for you to get out," you listen to your kids, and the resentment. Both of my sons, my oldest son and my youngest, learn how to be fathers. They learn how to be true fathers because of what they watched. And my daughter learned how to be that mother because they take care of their responsibilities, because they were given an example of what a parent does to take care of and not to hurt or harm.
Well, I thank you so much for coming on.
I thank you for having me.
Oh, this has been a blessing, and I'm thankful to God that I got through this without tearing up. It's such a powerful testimony of how God brought you over, He brought you through, and how He's given you the strength to forgive. We must forgive. Yeah. We as people of God must forgive. And for you that is watching this show today, if you have unforgiveness in your heart, I plead with you, I beg you, no matter what the circumstances is, no matter what the situation is, please forgive. Forgiveness is not for that other person. The forgiveness is for your freedom. We thank you all so much for tuning in to The Truth conversations no one likes to have. Until next time, God bless.